Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 215. Thanks so much for joining me. Today's guest, Maryann Corbett, is here. She'll be joining us in about 5 or 10 minutes. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do it because you love poetry, and I know you do too, so please do click the like button and share, subscribe, tell your friends, which is the nicest part. If you say, oh, I had fun on the Rattlecast last night, if you post that on Twitter or Blue Sky or Facebook or Instagram or whatever you want to do, that helps a lot. Just spreading the word about how wonderful these nights are that we get to fill with poetry. Now, as we always, we're going to start with the Poet Respond poet. And Alicia Rebecca Myers is here too. So let's say hello to Alicia. Hi, Alicia.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks so much for being here and writing this really beautiful poem. It was a difficult situation, of course, for so many people just to think about, let alone have any kind of connection to. And, it was one of those weeks where there's so many Poet Respond poems. It was several hundred, and almost all of them were about this same topic. And it's one of those times where poetry really helps the healing process, to be able to think about things and work through your emotions in that way. And so it's great to come up with so many poems. But can you talk a little bit about how your poem came to be and why it's here?
Sure. Well, I really felt the poem was insistent because I had a ton of other work I needed to do, but it kept coming back to me. My brother-in-law had just found out an hour before I wrote the poem that, sorry, my child is coming in.
That's okay.
It's like the pandemic all over again. Had found out that he lost a very close family friend in the attack. And I had also read Maya Alper's account, the dedication in my poem, or her quote rather, and I was moved by it, and so I felt like I wanted to really respond to that. So I sat down and immediately I thought, like, I don't exactly know what to say because I felt like all the voices of all of humanity was just on me, but I felt like I always I to return to structure as a way to make sense often in poems. So I tend to write villanelles and sonnets when I feel that something almost defies logic, and I think that terror in any form defies logic, and so the villanelle was really the way to respond to that.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful villanelle, and the that first line, "the extraordinary arms of the bush," was that the one that generated the rest of the sounds of the poem? Is that how it came to be? You heard that phrase and then came through, or did that come later?
It came first, yeah. I always base poems. I'm very sound based because I have a music background, and I think a lot about. That's why I like villanelles so much, because they're so sound driven. And I was thinking about arms felt important to me because I'd read a lot of other accounts of Maya Alper's experience and from her, and I felt like the bush was really holding her. And I also liked the word arms because it also evokes weaponry, and so I wanted to do a lot in the poem where I played around with some of the double meaning of words in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just such a heartbreaking account. I mean, the thing that did about the poem for me, I always talk about this, but when I'm reading submissions, it's the poem that sort of gives me an emotional reaction, or even like a physical reaction, like the goosebumps kind of feeling of being so, connected to a thought, and that puts yourself in the space where so many news articles, there's such a distance to them. And this poem actually makes it, transfers the feeling of actually being there. Did you know that this was going to be the angle you were going to write about, writing about Maya Alper? The quote came from that? Was that the start of the poem?
Yeah, that was the start of the poem because I think that this is a very polarized moment, and I have very close friends who are posting about free Palestine, which I understand, and then I have a lot of Jewish family who are still in mourning, sitting shiva. And so to me, I wanted to approach this from a position of how can we find the strength to keep going. I really wanted to think about Maya's humanity. I think she's incredible. And I know I wrote you, Tim, and told you that I shared the poem with Maya. I found her on Facebook and I shared it with her because I think after it was published, I felt like more than anything, she was the reader I needed to reach. And she wrote me back and she said, thank you for this poem. And of course, I thanked her. Anyone listening should go to her Facebook page and see her videos and account of the experience, because it goes into even more detail about just how, I don't want to say gracious necessarily, because I think in this moment we also have to It's complicated. It's not just about Grace, but I think that her will to survive and look for love in this moment is so strong. And that's why I wanted to write the poem about her, because I think otherwise it was going to be very issue driven. It was going to be, I don't want to blame any side right now. I think that I'm trying to sit in the moment of people dying and wanting to be with them and encourage them to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's really cool that you found Maya, and that's the heart of what Poet Respond is all about too, because poems have to find the space between. They can't be one side or the other, or they don't work as poems. It's those interstices between the sides that poems live, and this poem shows that really well. Do you want to go ahead and read it? This is The Bush. Do you want to read it?
Yeah, I will. And I noticed when I did the recording for Rattle that it's very hard, some of the sounds to read, like conscious hush does not roll off the tongue. And so I stumbled a few times. And I think that's actually an important component of the poem, is that this isn't easy to say. And I don't know, that just added a layer for me. So I'll start with her words. Every time I thought of anger or fear or revenge, I breathed it out. I tried to think of what I was grateful for. The bush that hid me so well that even birds landed on it. The birds that were still singing. The sky that was so blue. Maya Alper, survivor of Hamas's attack on the tribe of Nova Music Festival. The extraordinary arms of the bush. Trap music still echoing. The singing birds, another cover. The conscious hush. The sky that was so blue above the rush. The sound of blood pooling, shots ringing, the extraordinary arms of the bush. The bush wasn't burning, the birds weren't ash, a prayer for breath. The rigid thorns clinging, birds another cover, the conscious hush. Lungs instead of terror, the labored wish to survive. Birds that landed kept going, the extraordinary arms of the bush. The roar of explosives, the forceful push of gratitude against anger. Mourning birds, another cover, the conscious hush. The thorns, the sky, the breath, the birds, the bush. The hidden body contorted, living, the extraordinary arms of the bush. Birds, another cover, the conscious hush.
Yeah, that's just a great poem, great way to transport you to that scene. And what really is the thing that works so great, I think, is the repetition in the Villanelle form. That's the sense of time, of how long the wait would be in the bush, waiting for to survive, is such a powerful thing, and really well done. Thanks for sharing that, Alicia.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yep, thanks so much. Have a good night.
You too.
Yeah, so that was Alicia Rebecca Myers with The Bush, this Sunday's poem on Poets Respond. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Maryann Corbett. So sit tight and I'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Maryann Corbett. She grew up in McLean, Virginia, and now lives in St. Paul, Minnesota. She worked for almost 30 years for the Minnesota Legislature. Trained as a medievalist and linguist, she holds a doctorate in English from the University of Minnesota. Though she wrote poems as a young person, she largely left creative writing during the decades when she did scholarly work, took care of a family, and worked full-time. One of her poems is included in the Best American Poetry 2018. She's the author of 6 books of poetry and 2 chapbooks. The most recent book is right here with a lovely title. I love that title, The O in the Air. Here she is, Maryann Corbett. Hey, Maryann, how are you doing today?
I am well, and thank you very much for having me, Tim.
Yeah, it's really my pleasure. As someone who, I really enjoy formal poetry and wish there was more. And so anytime we have a guest that wrote sonnets for us and they have a book, I really want them on so we can have more formal poetry going on. And so it's really great to have you for that reason alone. And then, of course, having one of the poems we published in Best American Poetry is always fun, too. So it's a double pleasure to have you. And this book is great as well. I love the title, The O in the Air. Before we read maybe a poem, do you want to explain a little bit where the title came from?
How shall I tell this briefly? A long time ago, Mary Merriam, another of the poets who was a great contributor on the poetry site Erratosphere, invited people to write poems in a particular form involving a short line, very few lines, and a particular rhyme scheme. I wrote the poem that is now the closing poem of the book that has the tagline, God is the question, the O in the air. And that's where I got my title.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's great. It's a lovely title. It's one of those ones that makes you, really excited to read the book, and I was really curious about it. Do you want to read the opening poem, Backstory?
Here we go. Backstory. It has a long epigram. There is a category of Northern European art in which a panoramic view, often a landscape, is the principal subject, while a classical or biblical scene appears as a distant detail. The foregrounds are ablaze with the mundane, a Renaissance reality, but real, though magicked with the North's painterly light. Take Bruegels. Auden did, although we question these days if it was Bruegels. Or one might ponder Teniers. Up front, the world and the flesh. So solid you think of stepping into the canvas to the plowed ground or hefting the armor's weight. Yet in the distance, a few brush strokes of fable. The boy with wings, the prisoner freed by the angel. Mere specks you have to sift for with attention, yank the scene by its ears and flip it over, as if to ask, what strange spell are you under that you go dazzled by life's pure distraction and daylight's days? Do not fall prey to the demon who soothes you with the steadiness of fact. Look here. The whole scene's leavened with this lightness. Step back and stare at the mist beyond this frame, these layers of ground, earth, and mineral spirit. It's there, if you look past mere vision's weakness. The question, always haunted by its answer. What if the world you learned in flame and darkness is apprehended only by these fancies? What if the whole of it is heavenly?
Yeah, that is a great opening poem, Backstory. With so much going on in the background, of course, at all times, and tying into the title in that last poem too. So much of this book is about prayer. And I always think of poetry as prayer. I think it's a kind of, for me, a secular kind of prayer, but it's a way of paying attention and sort of speaking to the mystery of the world and engaging with it and sort of engaging with it directly through language, which is what prayer really is too. How much of that comes in as far as what you consider to be poetry? Is that what you think you're doing sort of with all poems? Are all poems a kind of prayer for you?
all poems, when we're writing them, are pretty intense, and I would be willing to call it prayer. In this particular book, there's so much, though, that leaps out of other spiritual practice. It starts in prayer, or it starts in liturgy, or it starts in liturgical music, which is something I was involved in for many, many years. So I think this is sort of the fruit of other kinds of prayer. Mm. In a way, though, the book is a vehicle for the many poems I found I had written that take the form of prayer, that even start out, "Oh Lord." A lot of them are my attempts to duke it out with God, if you'll pardon the phrasing.
Yeah, and I think that duking it out with God, that wrestling with God, is a sense of what religion really is. I think there's this sort of idea that faith is about having, faith. Maybe that's the problem in the words, but faith is really a wrestling. It's a struggle with the concepts of a higher power and what that would mean and what that means for your life and how to engage with it. And so I think a struggle is a kind of prayer too. So I think it fits perfectly with that way of being.
There are people who think that you need to be submissive to, and I mean, that's, I believe, what Islam means, submission. I have not achieved submission. I struggle a lot. Wrestling is not a bad term for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm on record, if you will, as being a struggling, not quite there, still working at it Catholic.
Mm-hmm. So how did poetry come into being in your life? You mentioned in your bio that long gap where you were focusing more on your career and raising a family, and what place did poetry have, and from what point? When did you first fall in love with poetry?
Oh, I first fell in love with poetry very early in my life, and I first really started grappling with it probably at 13, when we had a long and very detailed poetry unit in 8th grade. And that's when I learned a lot of specific things about form and about meter. And I'm extremely grateful for what Sister Walter in 8th grade Catholic school did for me in that particular grade. Mm-hmm. So that was the start of it. And then I decided that I was going to study intensely very early poetry in the undergrad years, and that I was going to specialize in medieval poetry and Old and Middle English in graduate school. And I was not writing poetry then, I was just studying it. And then, as I said, there were many, many years when I just was too busy. Things erupted, if you will, when both of my children were off at college, and I was having a particularly difficult time at work, experiencing a lot of resistance to things I was trying to accomplish at the office. And that fight, if you will, came out in poems, mm-hmm. Which were terrible at the start, the way most people's are. So I was very grateful to find a ratosphere and get advice and help and encouragement. And it went from there. And my first book was published in 2012. And as you said, now there are 6 of them.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's so, it's a frequent story that you hear, that it's when, we have times that are difficult personally that we turn to poetry because there's so much to process. And it's interesting, too. It feels to me, looking back at medieval poetry, it seems to me that there's the purpose that's very different, than what we do now. Do you have a sense of that? That in the medieval times and even just pre-industrial revolution, that the poetry was more about storytelling and performance. And then at some point it turned inward and almost as a psychological tool for exploring your own understanding of the world. whereas in the past it was more of a way to share stories. Do you get that sense, like looking back, being, it's not often I get to talk to a medieval scholar. Do you get that sense looking back at medieval poetry that there was a different sort of purpose behind the poetry?
The world of medieval poetry is absolutely huge. And I can certainly think of lots of strands of medieval poetry that are, as you say, narrative. Beowulf, as you know, all of the epics or the romances, the Lays of Marie de France, the Walter von der Vogelheide, the German epics, the Nibelungenlied. Those are many strands, but there are, as you say, the performative kinds, and the clever stuff like the Old English lyrics of the Exeter book. I should have prepared better for this particular
No, it's
answer.
all right. It's all right.
What I'm trying to say is, let's not generalize the way I think you wanted to. It's really all over the map.
And what was it that drew you to that? Was there some certain thing that you fell in love with there and drew you to want to read more of that particular time period?
I think I can even pinpoint the day and the time and the poem in junior year AP English when I came upon, in the fat anthology that we were using, the translation of Gawain and the Green Knight.
Yeah, I love that. That was the first thing from that era that I loved too. Yeah.
And I still remember the lines of that particular translation. So runs the year in yesterday's many. And I was just blown away by the alliterative form and the role of those rough accentual lines. It was a rhythm that was new to me, and the intensity of that alliteration was also new to me, and it tended to get stuck in the brain. And I'm still a little obsessive about the four-stress alliterative line. There aren't a lot of poets who write a lot of poems in the four-stress alliterative line, but I love it. I do too much of it. I'm still producing those.
Why is it that you think that we don't do that as much anymore? Because it is, when you read that, you hear the music of that. You get that same sense of verse that you would get from iambic pentameter, but through the alliteration instead. Why do you think that sort of has fallen out of favor and we're more, if we do formal poetry at all, it's more pentameter, just iambics in general, or the meters that we use?
Our ears are just not trained to it. We know how to hear iambic pentameter, but we don't always know how to grab onto a scansion of something that isn't da-da, 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 da-da. It's more variable. You have to grasp it.
Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem from the book. This is, we want to make sure we get through a good number. And the next one he had is Overture.
And that's fortunate because this one actually does use some of that rough accentual alliterative form. I sort of wish that I had kept the epigram that I originally had, which explained that overture is from ouverture or apertura in Latin, meaning opening. Be praised, Lord, for propped open windows. In the muggy meanness of mid-July, they speak reassurance. In the next yard, high voices yammer, small boys brandishing brave new insults from the old playbook, while otherwhere across the alley, the tantrum wail of a wild toddler repeats da capo. Will there be this year young housemates warring, screen doors that whomp, wheels grinding gravel. In this heat, wake us. Send us street theater at 3 in the morning. Mad lovers battling over jealousies, bills, the whole grand opera. Watch now in mercy, those others mum in the iced quiet of their central air, their curtained sorrows.
Yeah, the beautiful ending there. That was Overture, again from the O in the air. And you can feel that alliterative verse, which we don't see very often at all. I can think of one poem in Rattle that's in that form, but that, praise Lord for propped open windows, the muggy meanness of mid-July. It's that alliteration right there that governs every line. And it is such a beautiful, especially performative, to read out loud. It sounds beautifully to hear those sounds repeating. And it gets back to the heart of what poetry is, which is patterns repeating and making meaning out of those patterns. And it's a really interesting way to go. What has the reception been to your poems like that? Do people, talk about that you write in that alliterative form, or is something that just sort of goes unnoticed usually?
When you talk about the reaction, I'm afraid that the first thing that comes to my mind is the comments of the judge when I won the Richard Wilbur Award, who admonished me that there were too many poems in four-stress alliterative lines in the manuscript, and I needed to cut some of them. That there are people who feel that you can't have more than one in a book, and I'm always going to break that rule.
Oh, well, that seems like a ridiculous rule to me because I love those poems. So you mentioned, getting back to poetry after that gap in life. I'm always interested in that. Were you reading poetry at the time? Was it like no poetry, and then you got into poetry all of a sudden when you had the need for it? Or were you always a reader of poetry?
I was always a kind of on again, off again reader of poetry, and I tended to read older things, classic things. What really got me going again was a marvelous, fortuitous accident. I was singing in the choir of the Cathedral of St. Paul, and I was bumming rides from Anna George Meek, who is a poet. And while she was ferrying me back and forth, I would grill her about what makes a poem good. And she was encouraging, and she shared a lot about her experiences writing poems, so that I got used to the idea of the ordeal of submitting and rejection, so that I wasn't afraid to dip my toe into that world.
And
so I went ahead.
Yeah. What would you say? I mean, that's always something that I'm curious about. What would you say is it that makes a poem good?
There are so many things. If you were to focus on, say, the level of the line, alliteration might do it, a pun might do it, an interesting word might do it, a nice enjambment might do it, just so there's something on every line that zings, that keeps you going. It can also be narrative that you glom onto and don't want to stop.
Yeah, well, that's a really good way to put it too. I mean, that sense of, to me, it's also memory, something that you want to remember, that has that like need to lodge itself in your mind, works as a poem too. Let's hear another poem, speaking of good poems. And the next one up is The Museum of American Opulence, which is a great title.
Sorry, I'm flipping pages here.
It's 33 if you're looking.
Got it. I guess I want to mention that the first two poems that I read were from the first of the book's 3 sections. And that section is mostly, shall we say, confessional, mostly about the experience of the family that one has in childhood, which is often rather confusing to the kid because there are so many things that kids are not told This is from the second section of the book, which is about the family that we establish in adulthood. This second section of the book also progresses from early married life to late married life, and it goes through the seasons. So here we are in winter and in, as you'll see, newlywedness. The Museum of American Opulence. We own too much. I'm thinking about a time in the days when all we had in the world was each other. A one-bedroom apartment, some wedding presents, and a heated waterbed in a homemade frame. Carless, we'd scrounge $1.40 in change, stand in the mean wind chill of early December, climb snow-pile Alps to board, and take the 6 downtown to the city's most luxe department store to look, to gorge ourselves on staring at glitter, at crystal chandeliers, at spotless chrome, at the glassed-in cases where jewelry sat on velvet, and then upstairs in housewares, the 100 patterns of china and silver, the piles of towels and blankets, the wild abundance long foretold by the prophets and certain to be our own if we lived right. And then we'd bus home, frozen and empty-handed, red-faced, laughing, tumbling into the bed, owning nothing, practicing pure desire.
Yeah, another great poem. That was The Museum of American Opulence from The O in the Air, the new book by Maryann Corbett. And that's such an interesting topic now, the age of the abundance that we're living in, and sort of what that does to the soul. And I think of, like, poetry being a kind of spiritual practice, a kind of prayer, as sort of a balm against that. But then I think, hey, wait a minute, I have books coming out of my ears. Everywhere I look, there's more poetry books. And so maybe that idea is misguided. What do you think about how much we take material possessions for granted, and this is the world that we live in?
Right now, my husband and I are trying to divest of a lot of possessions, and it is a struggle. And we wonder how on earth we amassed so much stuff. And part of it is the effect of having lived in the same house for almost 37 years. So we go about taking things to Goodwill and to Tech Dump and to wherever. And there's a poem in the book called Hoarder about the process of divesting not only of physical things, but of memories you want to get rid of, experiences you would like to put aside. It's all a struggle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, we had Jane Hirschfield last week, of course, a famous Buddhist poet, and the idea of non-attachment and letting go is the whole heart of that entire philosophy and religion. And it's interesting. I mean, poetry is the one thing I can't let go of. I feel like, if it's a novel, I feel like, oh, I won't go back to that. I know I read it, I'm done, and for the most part. But a book of poetry, it's so hard to get rid of because I might want to read that again someday. And that's the beauty of poetry, but also sort of a curse when you start to have bookshelves and bookshelves that are running out of room.
I'm trying to buy ebooks, and I'm trying to divest of things that I haven't looked at for a while. And especially when it comes to contributors' copies of magazines and subscription copies of magazines, what I like to do is make a pile of them and then offer the pile on social media to anybody who wants them. I'll mail them. I especially want to send books and magazines to those who teach and who will share them with students. Mm-hmm. And I've done this a bunch of times now. And maybe now more people will know that I do that. Be on the lookout for those offers.
Yeah, that would be good. And one of the things I like to do is leave them places randomly, like leave them in an auto shop or leave them in a, instead of the waiting room at the doctor's office, leave a book of poetry. And I asked one time a doctor poet that we published, whether or not, like, why they don't use subscribe to Rattle for their waiting room. And they said if I did, it would disappear and I would have no books because people would walk away with it. And that's what always happens if I leave them there. But I think that's a good thing. So if we leave our poetry around and let it disappear, walk off with people who might need it, I think that's a good thing to do too. But anyway, let's hear the next poem too, which is a similar type of topic about letting go. This is a responsorial psalm for the beneficiary of my mother's will, on page 90 if you're looking.
Before I start reading, I want to explain just a little bit. There are a number of denominations that have regularly as parts of the liturgy responsive reading of a psalm. And it might be a lector or a cantor singing verses and a congregation uttering the refrain, or it might be two parts of the congregation alternating. And that's the model that this poem is built on. You'll see when the poem is in front of you on the screen, the little symbols for verse and response. The verses are all taken from bits and pieces of Psalm 16 that I've been hearing for years and years and years as part of the liturgy. The responses are all my reactions to the process of the distribution as I acted as executor to my mother's will and as the recipient of lots of her physical things. This talks mostly about her much prized collection of teacups. So here we go. Responsorial psalm for the beneficiary of my mother's will. O Lord, you are my inheritance. Unearthed from murky records, set down at tables where too little was said by kinfolk who hedged their memories. Yea, I have in you a goodly heritage. In a will laid out like an Edwardian banquet, its places set by gloved hands, precision ready to shatter. In you, who are my portion and cup, my place at a feast set by death, a dinner announced by unnerving letters from courts, full of strange demands like the dreams of prophets. My cup of blessing, delivered in the fullness of time by UPS in a corrugated carton whose breached sides leak bubble wrap, and unpacked at last, gold-rimmed, daintily painted, bone-white shimmer of longing for an ease there was never enough of. O Lord, you uphold my lot, which I hoard now at the back of a cupboard, accreting a fuzz of dust and kitchen grease, a richness, O Lord, too breakable for the living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was responsorial psalm for the beneficiary of my mother's will from the O in the air. One of the things we were talking about, sort of the purpose of poetry a couple times, and one of the things that I think about poetry is doing is sort of unraveling taboos, because there's some things that we don't speak honestly about, and death and sex are two of the big ones. People say, why is there so much death and sex and rattle? And it's because it's the stuff that we don't engage with honestly for most of our lives. And so that's what poets tend to write about, because we're speaking the truth to the things where the truth isn't fully spoken, maybe as a way to think about poetry. So it's really interesting to see a run of poems about this in the book. What is your sense of, your relationship to death? How has that changed how you think about it over time?
In a way, it was the last illnesses and deaths of my parents that gestated many, 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 many of all of the poems of all of my books, and a lot of them are concentrated in this particular book. In particular, the things that sprang from my mother's death are in this book. And there are, as you say, explorations of that problem from many angles. One of the angles is finally getting into the stories that she wouldn't ever tell me about her marriage before she married my father. There were lots of secrets, and there's a long poem called Knowledge in there that tells the entire story.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. So speaking of questions
about death, particularly not just the death of my mother.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When people were, I'm sorry to say it this way, dying left and right in 2020, there was a lot to grapple with, and that's why the poem "Buying a Plot in Plague Time" is in this book. Though it wasn't originally in the manuscript, I added it before we finally went to press.
Well, want to go ahead and read that?
Yes, I will, and it is on page 68. Pardon all this flipping.
No problem.
And it says after Larkin, because this is exactly on the model, the rhyme scheme, the metrical pattern of Larkin's Obad. Buying a plot in plague time. Shouldn't the moment be more, well, dramatic? Shouldn't it toll like Donne's dead bell? But no, mere paper rustling. It's a burst of static that stutters off to silence while late snow alights outside and melts forgettably, a numb reminder. Nothing I can see in the small print addresses dread or God or love. Somber reflection? Not a bit. Forms in quadruplicate, white over yellow, pink and goldenrod, for a dead end. No hymns, no holiness, no funeral. Every gathering spreads the plague. Perfunctory forms depress me, and they press me now because I've left so much so vague. When until now has dying loomed so real I shrank from my dead flesh? Or when did I feel this keen to leave less horror for my son and daughter, save them shock and awe about choices when mine run out? I mutter grimly, I will get this done. And still I sit here, playing my numbers game, tossing my rhyme pairs into the winds of fear. Back to the labor, back to the minor shame of shuffling off my life. Check there, signed here. Earth gets my ashes, grudgingly, on terms that reek of real estate and legal firms. Transfer on death arrangements and new will spew gray phrases, drone and drone and drone, like worrying a bone, this work to stifle terrors I can't kill. So work, bending the spirit to the letter, bowing the head at how the flesh unweaves, goes down like a stiff drink. The aches no better yet for the iron aftertaste it leaves. Here, plague, take this dull prose, spare those I love. I sign at all the X's, and to prove my resoluteness, press hard on the pen, scribble the check, and seal the envelope. Clinging weakly to hope, I thumb the stamp on. No one says amen.
And that was Buying a Plot in Plague Time from the air. Oh, the O in the air. And people have mentioned already how wonderful your endings are, and in the chat window. And what is it? How do you come to an ending? Speaking of death and the death of a poem, maybe. But where do you find the end of a poem? How do you know when it's complete and when it hits in the right way? Is that something that you work at more, or is it something that comes to you sort of naturally in the process?
I was having a Facebook message chat not too long ago with Haley Lighthouser, and she was looking for an end, and I had to sheepishly explain that I usually know where I'm starting exactly and where I'm ending exactly, and it's this mushy middle that I have to struggle for. But I know what happens at the end because I usually plot it beforehand and have to figure out how to get there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I always feel like there's sort of two ways to write. One is like hacking out through the bush, having no idea where you're going or where it's going to lead. And the other is sort of seeing the pinnacle up on the hill. You don't know how to climb the top of the mountain to get there, but you're just going up and up, knowing where you're going. And
sometimes I feel like I'm breaking Robert Frost's rule or dictum that says, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. Well, I'm not surprised where I'm going to end because I've pre-plot the thing.
Yeah, but the surprise is how you get there, though. That journey up the cliff face
for me,
to get
yes,
to the top.
It is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that still works. So, and so many times, the rhyme at the end is something that really clicks the poem home. And here we have my resoluteness press hard on the pen, and then it ends, I thumb the stamp, no one says amen. And it's one of those poems where the rhyme is so well done that you almost don't notice that it's rhyming until you get to that, solid ending, and you're like, oh yeah, the whole poem was rhyming, wasn't it? Is that one of the things you try to do? Do you think rhyming at the end of a poem strengthens it?
If it's a rhyming poem, yes, it is, unless you've tried to veil it for some reason. Mm-hmm. And then there are lots of things you can do with the rhyme that does hide it. You can use envelope rhyme, where the rhymes are not right close together, and you don't have that click shut like a box, two of them right at the end, the way a Shakespearean sonnet has. Mm-hmm. I like Shakespearean sonnets because they do wallop you with it at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's definitely all kinds. So if anybody has any questions for Maryann, leave them in the chat windows, either on Facebook or YouTube. I'm watching them both. And somebody already asked, where was it? It was, it was Janthi Rangan, asked if you could talk about your book covers and the titles, especially Credo and Breath Control, which I actually have over there. I should have brought them out, or maybe in a different room. But how do you choose the photographs for the cover, etc.? So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think Janthi, and this in particular too, is a beautiful book. I'll show the cover again for everybody who's watching and not listening. The O in the Air is a great title, first of all. We talked about that a little bit. And then the sort of monochromatic blue on white, which you kind of can't see because of the way the lighting effect is right now, but this is the snow white landscape of Minnesota, I assume. And then the O in the Air, sort of a two-color palette, and a really beautiful book. How did the covers come to be? Because they do, all your books have been great.
Those covers have all come about very differently. My first book, Breath Control, I had to find the photograph, and I knew I wanted a bubble. I was afraid that was a cliche, but I happened to find in Wiki Commons and free a bubble that reflected a house. And since that particular book talks about domestic issues a lot, and also talks about the kind of control and holding in that women have to execute all the time, that was the perfect thing for it. Cradle for the Checkout Line in Winter, since that was an Able Muse book, most of the work to find an appropriate cover was done by my editor, Alex Pepple. He gave me choices, but that was the one that we both settled on. And it focused on the wintry poems that come early on in the book. Mm-hmm. My third book, Medieval, again, I had to find a painting that would reflect both the concentration on the Middle Ages that is the heart of that book, and something that talked about, frankly, evil, because there's a lot of struggle and resistance in that book. And so I found a 15th century woman in a headin who is severely, her hair is pushed way back, and her face is extremely frowny. She's not happy with anything she's doing. Street View, again, is one that Alex Pepple helped me find. And then there was In Code, and that's another Alex Pepple choice. This one is a photograph taken by Sherry O'Keefe that she just happened to post on Facebook. And I said, aha, that's the image of threatening, unfriendly weather, mysterious weather that I need. And she graciously let me use it.
Yeah, very nice. So yeah, a different range, but they all make such great covers. It's a really wonderful series of books. One of the things we haven't talked about yet is your time in the Minnesota Legislature, 35 years working there. What was it that you did, and did it relate to poetry at all? Is there something that you took from that you use in poetry now?
If I may refer people to my book, In Code, it's kind of all there. I was the only non-attorney on the professional staff, and I was hired in order to help attorneys write plain English. But that obviously didn't take all my time. So what I spent the bulk of my time doing was managing a group of indexers. And we created the indexes and the finding aids for the Minnesota statutes, the laws of Minnesota, and the Minnesota rules. And those are many volume compendia, and their indexes are fat volumes by themselves. There was a lot of work to do in a short editorial period, so it was a lot to manage. That's what I did. And it was highly unpoetic. That may have been part of the impetus to get to do something with poetry again. It was overcoming the unpoetic force of things.
Well, the administrative process, of sort of records keeping and tracking. There's so much of that with submissions anyway, at least, right? Having to, that. Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem. I think the next one we had is Another Night on 89.
Okay, that's on page 89.
Yeah.
Here we go. Another night, another load of corpses, jostled out of the reeds by college rowers, according to the local crime reportage, sinking pack-laden into the Normandy riptide deep in a grainy late-night documentary. Blue-lipped, mottled chill on a coroner's slab in this week's 23rd detective thriller, or mud-bloody in Bosworth-Fieldian chaos. Shakespeare's, histories, it hardly matters. Bullets, gurglings, screams, ominous music. The screen supplies us everything but the odor. Does this explain why I was unprepared when, after hours of sitting beside my mother, alone, flown hurriedly in from far away, hours of rosaries, psalms, calm classical radio, with no response apart from her changeless breathing, I ducked into the hospice kitchen, thinking, might it be safe to break for a bit? Wolf down my leftovers of spinach and cheese croissant. And she, with her usual undramatic methods, met God while I was paying no attention.
Yeah, another one of those great endings. And a great title, too, Another Night, Another Load of Corpses, from the O in the Air by Maryann Corbett. And your poems throughout, we've seen so many poems today that have such great, rich lines. There's a lot of concrete content in the lines, a lot of texture and sights and feeling to them. What is your writing process like? Does that come through a lot of revising and sort of adding those details, or does it come in the process of listening to the music and letting the poems happen as they will?
I revise a lot. Mm-hmm. Looking at my first drafts is often quite painful. And on occasion, I have made the mistake of sending out a first draft and being told, that wasn't the one we accepted. But yeah, I revise a lot. It's a very rare experience for a poem to come to me almost whole. Although one that did was the one that Rattle published that was in Best American Poetry. And I forget its entire title.
So do I. It's pretty long.
Prayer concerning the new, more accurate translation of certain prayers.
There you go. That's it.
Yeah, that one walloped me, and it walloped me because I was so very angry. But no, most of the time it's a change here, a change there, until finally something takes final shape.
And how do you know about of those rough drafts? Like what percentage ends up being a finished poem that you want to publish? And how do you know that you've got something that you want to work with?
I hate to confess this, but I often make the mistake of sending something in too soon. Mm-hmm. And then after several rejections, for various definitions of several, I fix it. Later on.
Mm-hmm. And so, do you have any advice for revising? Like, is there techniques that you use, or anything you go about, adding those details and making the poem tighter and more crisp, like they are?
It's the same old advice that everyone always gives, and that I'm so bad at taking. Give it time, put it away for a while, let it be, come back to it and back to it and back to it, and tinker.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, patience is a virtue. That's for sure. Let me say now, this is the time where I should say that if you like what you're seeing, please do click the like button. Wherever you're watching this, there's a way you can give it a thumbs up or a like or something. And that helps poetry spread around all over the place. More people will see it in their feeds if you click the like button. There's a lot more people watching than likes, which is always the case. I know a lot of people don't log in or have accounts, but if you do click the like button wherever you're watching. Let's do the next poem. And the next topic that sort of comes up in the book are family relationships and secrets. And we have a good number of poems about that. Is there anything you want to say about that before you read one of them?
Well, as I said earlier, there were a lot of things that my mother didn't tell me about her past. And there are poems specifically about that. But this is one that just hints at what is to come. And I'm thinking you want me to read Ghazal for a Bottle of Shalimar, 1956. Exactly. Mm-hmm. The clear amber scent in its bottle, its glint from the top of the vanity. Cut crystal flutes with a frosted glass stopper catching the sun on her vanity. The glamorous dreams of our mother, unspoken to curious children, were sharp as the quarter moon curve of that bottle enshrined on the vanity. What were they guarding? What secrets? And how would a child understand them? And what was I thinking, small magpie lured on by the glitter of vanity? Wreckage of beauties, the spill, the wet, the gray film on the rosewood. I was the firstborn, the first to drive thorns through the heart of her vanity. Painfully, mothers forgive. on the mountain with 7 stories, how long will the granite of penitence weigh on the spine of my vanity? And what do my children remember? What hauntings by anger and tears does my memory hide from itself in the metal-bound chest of my vanity? 60 years on, and the stain-mottled dresser now broods in my bedroom, breathing regret and my name and the words of the preacher, vanity.
And that was a guzzle for a bottle of Shalimar, 1946.
56.
56, sorry. 56 from the O in the air. Yeah, thanks, Maryann. So let's see. I had a question I wanted to pass along. Where did it go? Well, I'll ask you instead. So, and I'll look at it as you talk, because there was a question here that was good. So talking about family secrets, how do you feel about revealing secrets in a poem? Is that something you have any reservation about? Or
I had big reservations about writing knowledge, and I waited to publish it until my mother had passed away. And of course, I didn't put it in a book until long after she was gone. Mm-hmm. And I felt fortunate that she was so totally unaware of the world of computers that she was never going to find it. After all, these were things that she didn't talk to me about. Some of them I had to learn from other family members. Some of them I only learned from her personal papers that became mine as child with power of attorney when she was in her last illness. So yeah, I didn't feel good about it.
Yeah. Did you talk about, I mean, those were complete secrets that you didn't know about at all? Or were there things that you talked about a little but didn't know? Were you wondering about that until you found those documents?
I have to confess that I was terribly naive and should have figured it out way before I did. But as is revealed in the poem called Knowledge, there was this terrible scene regarding who would receive communion at my wedding. And that was when my mother had to explain to me that she had been married and divorced before she married the man who would be my father.
Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem around that topic. October is the one you had next on page 48.
Page 48. Again, this is from the section of the book that's about the families we form when we're grown-ups. October. I fail at them, those scenes where beauty is married to fear. I have failed before with this one. How can I make it clear when the moment itself was a blur? My son and I, that night, stepped through the warm, wet air that had magicked every light to a wide, all-hallowing halo. He said, I think he was 10, still with his clear soprano, "It's lovely out here." And then the edge of every nimbus, pale gold through a fog scrim, shivered, knowing that beauty soon would be bullied out of him.
That was October. Again, another poem from the O in the air. We talked a little bit about your love for medieval poetry. What are your favorite contemporary poets? What are the poets that you like to read right now, especially with a formal bent? Are there certain favorites of yours?
Well, you can fault me for living in the past, but my favorite, the books I keep right by my bed that I continue to dip into are the collected poems of Richard Wilbur and Dick Davies and Anthony Hecht, and now the selected of Alicia Stallings.
Mm-hmm. And what is it about that group of people that you love the most and maybe try to model in your own writing?
They do form so perfectly. Mm-hmm. I fudge a lot. I use slant rhyme and near rhyme and lots of things that are formal but that are not rhyming, that foreground meter rather than rhyme. And those folks rhyme. And I'm very fond of, I think I'm attributing this correctly to Alicia Stallings, of the fact that rhyme frees the poet from what he wants to say.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're focusing on finding the perfect rhyming word, the unexpected rhyming word, you'll go off in a direction that you hadn't foreseen and get a better poem out of it that way.
Yeah, I was thinking about that recently because of I read an article about how and sleep. We think of dreams as sort of the imagination just sort of running wild, but it turns out that there's sort of this system test that the brain is doing, where there's another time when you're awake where you can move one muscle at a time. And so while you're sleeping, that REM sleep is actually these twitching of like just one muscle here and there. And that is what stimulates the randomness of your dreams. It's actually this like sort of systems test that your brain is doing. And so I think that's kind of why dreams get so wild, is because there's this sort of randomness added to it all the time. And it occurred to me that that's exactly what formal poetry is doing, because you have to come up with a rhyme, and it's making you think of things that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. So it's like injecting this constant sort of stimulation from out of surprising places, and then the poems go in surprising places too. I think it's a really interesting comparison. And you find that even the interesting thing is, though, you were talking about writing toward the ending. And do you still find, you're still finding surprise on the journey, right? Like how you get to the ending is almost like the path is the surprise, right? And so do you still find that when you're writing formally, that you have that injection of surprise from the rhyme and form like that?
I talked a little earlier about the mushy middle,
Mm-hmm.
and I do have to resist in the middle of things the temptation to be lazy and not to actually work for that unexpected thing. And that's what often takes the time in revision, to cross out that thing that was too predictable and to go ahead and reach for the different rhyme word, the thing that's going to keep people going, the unexpected word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the unexpected is so important, because we set up these expectations in sound and then we subvert them, and that's the surprise and the pleasure of it. Well, let's finish out. We have one last poem and the timing's perfect. So let's close it out with a Circadian Lament. And that's on page 34 if you're looking.
34. I wanted to close with something that was a little more upbeat. And this goes out to my daughter, who's not a baby anymore, but boy, did she give me trouble way back when. Circadian Lament, sung to a wakeful baby. Go back to sleep. You've made a slight mistake switching your days and nights around this way. The time will come for nights you spend awake, for cough and colic, ear and stomach ache. Though now you babble charmingly and play the infant hours away, a light mistake. There will be bitter medicines to take some night. Take love, its wide-eyed thrills one day, its clammy sweats the next. Take nights awake, your soul in shreds, your bank account at stake, your eyelids propped with stale cafe au lait, searching the stars for some obscure mistake, when futures cloud and omens turn opaque, and panic makes you pace the floors and pray. There will be no escape from nights awake. I warn you, and my wisdom doesn't make one whit of difference. Seize the night, you say, in coo and babble. Ah, well, my mistake. Instruct me in the joys of nights awake.
Yeah, that might be my favorite poem in the book. So I'm really glad you chose to close with that. Circadian Lament, sung to a wakeful baby. And you can just feel how the form carries the poem, and the tune sings it through so beautifully. And that was from the O in the Air again, the newest book just out from Maryann Corbett. Thanks, Maryann, for being a guest tonight. It was great talking to you. Very informative and a beautiful book.
Thank you, Tim, for everything.
Yeah, definitely. My pleasure. Have a good night.
You too.
And once again, that was Maryann Corbett. You can find all 6 of her books at her website, which is really well done, at MaryannCorbett.com. It's spelled like you see it on the screen. I'll put that up right there really quick. Maryann Corbett, Mary, Maryann, Corbett, Corbett.com. MaryannCorbett.com if you'd like to find this book and all the others by Maryann. Now it's time for the open lines. We're going to take a quick break and go to them. But let me tell you how it works first. I'm going to get the invitation link here. I'm going to paste it into the chat windows. But before I do that, go to Open Mic. That's openmic at rattle.com. Well, don't go there. Email the poem there. I guess that's the way to say it. Email the poem that you want to read. 1 poem, 2-page max. Try to be a short. We have a lot of people to get into, so try to have a short poem if you can. 2 pages is the max. Email it to Open Mic. That's openmic at rattle.com, so I can pull it up and show it on the screen as you read. And then join the Zoom link, which I am posting in the chat windows. I have gotten rid of that heart button too, thanks to some suggestions by Dick Westheimers. Thanks, Dick. So I can actually pin the Zoom link on YouTube like I used to. That heart button was always getting in the way. So that is there on Facebook. That is there on YouTube. And I will be right back with more poetry. So sit tight and see you in a minute. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. As you see, Katie Dozier is here, our prompt poems editor. Hey, Katie.
Hello. Good job with the quick set change.
No problem. Yeah, we had to get some chairs out. So now we have chairs we can actually put close to each other, which is the problem before. So the prompt for this week was to write an essay, which is a poem. It was Jane Hirshfield's form, and the essay is it comes from the scientific sort of usually for minerals, but other things. Anytime you break down something to see its component parts, that's an essay. And so that's what Jane Hirshfield does with her essay poems. And so that was your prompt, to write an essay. And so what did you do, Katie?
Well, what I did was struggle and write 4 different essays, and I picked, believe it or not, my best essay to share, not my worst, as it turns out.
Well, that's a good idea.
So it was definitely an interesting form to write, and I struggle with it, I think, because there's kind of like a scientific detachment in order to write it well, and it's the opposite of how I normally write. So it was interesting, and I enjoyed it. So
okay, well, let's hear it. This is Katie Dozier with To Silence an Essay.
Okay. I know your deep snow, how powder can absorb every crow's cry. I know your frozen lakes, ice thick enough to run away on. Many times I tried to break through, but gave up after only a few pounds of my pickaxe. I know you never begin quite so solid, quite so frigid. First you whisper into the room, sneak a web in behind your back, a spool of silk so strong it can carry people. Sometimes you ferry them through a lifetime of if-onlys. I know your snowflakes swirl around the tops of heads. I know you are the curve on question marks, how fires curl your smoke. And I know your nemesis, speech, a jackhammer that drills down into the frigid past or rockets up to rake the plasma of the future. But you are best at staying in one place. I know you sit by a campfire, content just to study the orange glow dancing on faces. I know that when you hold a newborn, you let her rest away the afternoon, milk drunk, a line of drool unspooling on your bare chest. And I know for certain that these golden hours we spend skin to skin from time to time make you want to sing.
Yeah, beautiful poem. That was To Silence, an essay. So what was the hardest part, or what was your experience putting this kind of poem together? It was different, than what both of us, I think, usually write.
Yeah, for me, I'm always like really linking things in between. So trying to create the gaps. Like I actually wrote this without stanza breaks. And then I was like, this doesn't work without stanza breaks, and really had to retool it more than normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me too. I realized I was writing sort of in with more of a Jane Hirschfield type voice, thinking about the silence more because of the way that it breaks things down and separates them out, which sort of implies a gap. You're sort of adding a gap to things that used to be mixed together is maybe a way of thinking about it. And so usually I like writing sort of rushed type poems. And this instead, I had a little more space. I decided not to have any stanza breaks, as you can see.
Oh.
But there were more variation of line length so that the pauses could be longer. And it was an interesting way to go about it. But this is, you did To Silence, and so I hadn't written mine yet. And so I saw yours. I said, well, I'll do To Noise. So To Noise, an essay. We act as though you were only a nuisance, an irritating addition to the system of being. No thing never not there. A mosquito in the ear, a buzz in the air. We only listen in your departure, when the power cuts off in the heat wave and the condenser ticks to a stop. So many sounds in the house to unnotice all at once. The hum of the fridge, the plastic fan in the computer, the transformer's static prick from the yard. And then an airplane in the distance. Children playing at the corner park. Bird calls to bird, neighbor to neighbor. A car zips by with its window down, one song in 3 notes. But in between each of these, your absence is the death that was before we were, the lack of even lack we know will come to be. Science says a little noise adds speed to a network. A quiet classroom makes it harder to learn. 100 miles up, there is no noise above the atmosphere. There is no sound in the airless hell beneath our feet. You are a blanket within the blanket that keeps us warm. The shapeless there we press against to give us form. And so that is To Noise, an essay.
Very nice. I think that was really effective not having the stanza breaks. I think now maybe I shouldn't have done them. I don't know.
Well, I looked at To Judgment doesn't have them, and Her Silence doesn't. And then, well, anyway, that is mine, To Noise, an essay. Let's see what everybody else has. And let's go first to, let's go to Carla Schwartz first in line. And we have 18 people here. So once again, let's try to be relatively quick, but we'll take our time too. Quick, what does that say? Quick but careful or something? That's what we're going to do. Hey, Carla, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. What a wonderful night of poetry so far. And I love both of your essays. I call them assays, not essays, but that's my own thing.
Yeah, I think that's what Jane said, and I think maybe she's right. But when I was, I did them, and we did of mRNA, and that's what we called them. So it's like stuck in my head that way. But anyway, maybe it's essay.
Right. So this is very different from your guys. So this is called Croc's Assay. Lightness, the light, the evening light, the low sun in the sky, autumn light, the morning squint, your eyes light, the first time fit, the smile that comes with that first essay, first try, the smile, the crocodile smile, the holes that make a nose, the nub-inspired holes that let air through, mud through, light through, wind, the dawning that at first glance these ugly shoes could possibly be something wanted, the mind changed, altered, the article read, the article that stated 87,000 footsteps comfortable, the article that touted airplane comfortable, the airplane that knows Crocs, welcomes them, their comfort, like the bowl of porridge the morning of an overseas flight. The embrace that comes, the embrace earned when the shoe, the gift, embraced. The never take them off feeling, the climb a mountain feeling, then like the ubiquitousness of electric cars, everywhere croxed feet, even overseas. So together you smile, your matching feet, your sweet, comfortable toes, almost alive, murmuring to each other, your feet, his feet, your Crocs, his Crocs, the big to the little, airy like clothes blowing on the line. And maybe you talk about the weather, but maybe you speak about the possibility of war. And somehow you feel enabled, your feet sheathed in silliness, cloaked with sound holes, open to enlightenment. Listen, the news.
Wow, Carla, that was great. I love the playfulness of that, and the use of Crocs, and contrasted with the rhythm and the sort of mood of the poem. It was wonderful work. I love that.
Yeah, are you going to confess that you own a pair of Crocs at this point?
I do own a pair of Crocs. I do. It's two, though, to take out the trash and to go to my softball games so I can put on my cleats. And it's
fair.
Yeah.
That's true also. And it's true also that I steal them when I have to go outside for brief moments.
It's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great poem. Thanks, Carla.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Yep, take care. It's Carla Schwartz with Crocs Essay. And you notice it took a while to get that poem up. All of Google stuff, including YouTube, is having trouble today. And it wasn't loading. So if it takes a while to get poems up, that's why. I'm sorry about that. Doing my best. I had to download it that time. And YouTube didn't load for a while today. When it was strange. I was a little worried we wouldn't be able to do it, but it seems to be working fine once we connected. So I don't know, they're having some issues. Anyway, let's go next to Joe Nolan.
Hey, Tim, how are you?
I'm good. Good to see you, Joe. Always fun.
Can you hear me okay?
We can, yeah.
Good. Okay, my poem is entitled Gaza. And this is about the will to genocide.
Okay, let's hear it.
In the competition for living space among the living and the dead shall have no dominion. Let them come all they will. We shall send them away to the heaven of their religion. The dead shall have no dominion. We've had them bottled up in an open-air prison for years without hope of aught but prison life. But if they wish to escape, the dead shall have no dominion, even over the little they had as prisoners in a prison. We'll bomb them all into rubble, and the dead shall have no dominion. We'll do the same with them as the Americans did with the Indians. Kill and shatter, bomb and scatter survivors we'll bottle up on reservations in hinterlands where they won't be in the way, and the dead shall have no dominion.
Hey, great poem, great reading of that as always, Joe, and the repetition works really well too. That was Joe Nolan with Gaza. Thanks for sharing that, Joe.
Thanks.
Yeah, Joe Nolan. And next up, let's go. We have some first-time callers. Let's go to some first-time callers to make sure we get them in. We'll get to everybody we can, and we'll stay as long as we have to. So there's that. But let's get to some people we haven't heard from before. Emma Goldman, Sherman. There you go. It was cut off on my screen so far. Hey, Emma, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm actually not really a first-time caller. I read something, I don't know, a year or two ago.
Okay, well, welcome back. It's great to see you again. What should we call it? A not so recent caller. It's been a while, and we get a lot of those, which is great too. So thanks for joining us. And where are you calling from, Emma? I can't remember.
New York City.
Ah, great. Okay, let me try to pull up. Did you email me your poem?
I did.
Okay, let me There it is. Dear Palestine is the one, right?
That's it.
Okay, perfect. And of course, we kind of know what this is about. Is there anything you want to say before you read it?
I was there during the first Intifada about 30 years ago doing human rights work with the Palestine Aid Society and the Palestinian Solidarity Committee. And I was the only Jew among them. And yeah, I wrote this, I think, thinking a lot of those images that I had from back then.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, are you going to pull it
I
up?
have it. Go ahead. It's up on screen for everybody else, and you read your own copy.
Oh, okay. Dear Palestine, I would fight beside you if I could, though I lie, soft body that I am, and would die quickly on the field. Your bodies are soft too. I want you to know I'm with you, all of you, praying for the ones who are gagged and bound, those being dragged out to blinding courtyards, shot point blank right now. I'm sending strength to the ones who are capped at the knees and walk on air, for the ones who do not dare leave their holes while their hearts beat in other places, desecrated homes that cry, return, return, O mapless ones, come back to your place in this world, what was stolen from you and your children. I sing with you for the teased and taunted, for the terrorized, for those whose parents were taken in the night, houses bulldozed beneath Klieg lights, where heavy metal on the loudspeakers plays like a victory parade to grind us all to rubble. I disown my own people who shed your blood, for fears they could have healed. Instead, they wear the skin of their past tormentors, like children becoming their worst nightmares, picking infected wounds, confusing you with the ghosts of their old enemies who haunt them on the lake of history, reflecting memories they cannot shake.
Yeah, and that was Dear Palestine. Once again, thanks so much for sharing that. That was Emma Goldman Sherman with that, and voicing what so many people are writing about, trying to make sense of all the awful things that are going on in the world right now. Thanks for sharing that, Emma.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Dear Palestine once again by Emma Goldman Sherman. And now let's go to Sari H. Dworkin.
Okay.
Yeah, hi. So glad you could join us. I believe you are a first-time caller, or at least maybe a long-time since caller, one or the other. Where are you calling from?
Oh, actually, I'm calling from San Luis Obispo, California.
Ah, right down the road. Beautiful place.
Yes, and I am a first-time, and I've actually just gotten back to writing poetry.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. It just makes life richer and more meaningful to do.
Yeah. And now, where are people seeing the poetry that you're putting up on the screen?
Oh, so you join here to share a poem, but you can still watch on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you were watching before, and that's where everything's included.
Okay. All right.
Did you send me the poem?
I tried to, but I don't think I got the address right.
Well, that's all right. Well, was it celebrating my wife's birthday?
Yes.
Okay, I got it right here anyway. Okay, so we'll all see it. You have to read your own copy. And let us know, is there anything you want to say about it before you read it?
Well, just that it's responding to the Israeli-Hamas war. And it started, the whole thing started on my wife's birthday. So the poem is celebrating my wife's birthday, October 10th, 2023, amid the Israeli-Hamas war. Today is my wife's birthday. I try to be happy and celebrate and wipe the terror, despair, and alarm from my face. And my cousin, a world away, hunkers down with her husband in a small bomb shelter under her home. Today, the mist covering the hill that brings me joy on my morning walk reminds me of a hand over a child's face as Hamas kidnaps him from a kibbutz. And my cousin, a world away, hunkers down with her husband in a small bomb shelter under her home. We walk into the restaurant for lunch and hover around the iPhone to listen to President Biden's speech, the way families hovered around radios, listening to Roosevelt and Churchill during World War II. And my cousin, a world away, hunkers down with her husband in a small bomb shelter under her home. Tonight at our synagogue, my wife and I exchange party hats for comfort and connection with congregants and community members. We listen to stories of fear and worry as sons and daughters are called to military service and lives already lost are mourned. And my cousin, a world away, hunkers down with her husband in a small bomb shelter under her home. We bask in the torrent of support the United States and other Western countries pour out for Israel and wonder how long it will last. We remember our history. We remember oil and gas prices rising. We remember signs, burn Jews, not oil. And my cousin, a world away, hunkers down with her husband in a small bomb shelter under her home. We call out to our God to smite our enemies as in times of yore. And we remember our God admonishing the Israelites who celebrated when Egyptians were drowning in the Red Sea. And my cousin, a world away, hunkers down with her husband in a small bomb shelter under their home. Today is my wife's birthday. I try to be happy and celebrate and wipe the terror, despair, and alarm from my face. And my cousin, a world away, hunkers down with her husband in a small bomb shelter under her home.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was Sari Dworkin with once again celebrating my wife's birthday amid the Israeli-Hamas war. Thanks for sharing that. Once again, another poem, addressing, giving voice to what so many people are feeling right now. Thanks for sharing that, Sari.
You're welcome.
And I forgot to say in my usual, announcement that you can share any poems you want. So you can share poems about current events like these. You can share poems from the prompts that we talked about earlier. Or you can share anything you'd like that you wrote recently, published recently. The lines are truly open as long as it's poetry. And poetry is whatever you call poetry. So whatever you want to share, feel free to. Let's go to Joe Cottonwood next.
Okay, hi.
Hi, Joe.
This is not about war or death. I was inspired by Jane last week and wanted to do an essay. And mine is called To Americana. And I realized after I wrote it that people who don't know what Americana is might not get it at first. I'm talking about the form of music. My son's a musician and he plays Americana, and I deeply love music. So, okay, here we go. To Americana. You grow from muddy waters. For a century, you remain barefoot with brambles in your hair. You chew bluegrass, drink corn. You run through lawn sprinklers. You spit tobacco. Your hands are raw from picking cotton. Your voice is black with dust of coal. Your farm blew away. You smell of swamp. The academy holds its nose, slams doors at you. You thrive in fresh air. You explore a continent, follow rivers by paddle, cross deserts by ox cart, climb mountains hand over foot. You kill the native and the buffalo. You regret. You sing of what remains. Your men go outlaw. Your women go wrong. You celebrate love. You betray it. You despise riches. You want some. You raise children in rags. They outgrow you, outgrow your front porch and tumble down shack. You shame them with twang and holler of blues. They trade Chevys for Teslas. They bring the South north. They bring the West east. And just wait. They return. They bring fresh children, dip their feet in muddy waters.
Oh, that's great. To Americana, an essay. Great use of the form, breaking that down. No pun intended. Thanks for sharing that, Joe. And I love Americana music, so it's one of my top of my playlists because I do love acoustic stuff especially. Thanks for sharing that, Joe.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, there's Joe Cottonwood with To Americana, an essay. Let's go next to Sharon Ferrante next. Hi, Sharon.
I had good. Hi. I had to get the chat out of there. I'm not too good with you guys know that. Hi, everybody. I wanted to thank you for the interview with Maryann. It was really quite beautiful and enlightening. I loved it.
Oh,
thank you.
So what do you have to share?
I did not write an essay.
See, I never looked it up, and I meant to, and that's the guilt of not having looked it up that was surfacing as I was babbling about it. But anyway, yeah.
But I wanted to come on and say hi and share something, so I just put some tanka.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I put 4 tanka for you.
Okay, we have it right here. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Enchanted by climbing your hills, I pull a blade of grass from each fall. In the forest, I walk in reverse. Suddenly, I begin to chase myself again. I open your book, feeling immortal. I close it, hoping for tomorrow. What's on your mind? The empty page asks. I'm waiting for the beauty of your non-truth.
Oh, those were wonderful. Yeah, Sharon. What is your favorite one, Katie?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think maybe the first actually. I don't know, but I also love the last one. But anytime Sharon Ferrante shares a poem, you just know it's gonna be good.
Yeah, I love that first one too.
Yeah.
I pull a blade of grass from each fall. That's just perfect. Yeah,
it's beautiful.
I've been writing a lot more tanka lately, so I wanted to share some.
Yeah, very cool. And it's one of those things I think maybe, as much as we love haiku around these parts, maybe we should give more attention to the tanka.
I think so too. 5 lines, a lot to work with.
I write them really strange. I don't, of course, adhere to any syllable count, and I don't worry about line length. I remember Caitlin was talking about it one time, certain kind of tanka. Mm-hmm. But no, I just write it the way that I want to read it. Because I read it out loud, and that's the way the line lengths go on it.
Yeah, well, that sounded great to me. Yeah.
I love tanka, yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Sharon. Wonderful as always, yeah.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah, take care. Yeah, Sharon Ferrante with For Tanka. Lex, let's go to Douglas Silver. Hey, Douglas.
Hi, Tim. Hi, Katie. Hi, all the poets. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as always. So what do you have for us today?
I sent something in. It's called an essay on my father's favorite phrases.
Oh, that's a great title. That's a great topic to do an essay on, I'd have to say.
Thank you. Well, last week, Tim, you noticed the phrase in my poem. It said, business is booming. You mentioned that. So I went back and thought of a bunch of things my father used to say. My father had a lot of phrases as well.
Oh, that's great.
So I'm trying to somehow maybe analyze them.
Oh, great. Let's hear it.
Okay. An essay on my father's favorite phrases. Although perhaps the least poetic person I've ever known, my father, even he had his moments. This was not one of them. As he was driving to the job site, Me, maybe 10 years old, another temporary service to install. Even then, I loved that phrase. Electricity to get the job going for the carpenters, the masons, the others. A bumper sticker on a car in front of us. Underground wires are beautiful. I laughed, read it out loud, and asked my father what he thought about it. He didn't laugh, didn't seem to hear me, and didn't tell me what he thought about it. But this was one of them. When he didn't like something, anything, the neighbor's dog yelping or the telephone on the wall nagging, he'd say, "I'm going to kick that thing right into next week." I tried with my young mind to imagine how he'd do that and what it would look like. Although I never figured it out, I liked the images in my mind of all these things flying. And then there's this one. If he knew something was going to take a while, anything, an electrical job he didn't want to do, or the payment for his property taxes, he'd say, "That'll take a month of Sundays." Even way back then, I was good at math. A month of Sundays, 30 days, 30 weeks, about 7.5 months. Even then, with my young mind, I knew a month of Sundays sounded a lot better than 7.5 months. And finally, only 36 years old, my father already an old man, bald, overweight, body brittle, raging diabetes, still undiagnosed as he reaches for yet another Reese's peanut butter cup. Every night he'd come home from work and he'd say, "My aching back," over and over. And before he could even ask, "What's for supper?" my mother rushing a plateful to him at the kitchen table. All of us kids hiding in our rooms, jumping like Pavlov's dogs, hearing her sweetly, softly yelling, "Time for supper, your father's home." End poem. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Douglas. A really funny poem, then using humor to get to the touching part of it. Thanks. It's just a great example of that. I loved the use of that. Underground wires are beautiful. I have to agree. That's great. Yeah, that's great. And I'm definitely going to start using a month of Sundays, too.
Yeah, a month of Sundays.
Yeah, thanks, Douglas.
Thank you.
Yep, take care. Yeah, Douglas Silver with an essay or assay, I don't know, on my father's favorite phrases. Okay. Yeah, I should have, before we did a whole segment on this, I should have looked it up.
Maybe we should just say essay and then we know we're wrong.
That's true. We could all be wrong together.
All be wrong together.
Speaking of being wrong together, let's call on Nate Jacob.
Hey, wrongness loves company.
It does. How you doing, Nate?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're great, yeah.
I agree.
So, hey, so what do you got to share?
Well, I wrote an essay, and I'm going to say it essay.
Okay.
It's not my style at all, and it's a little heavy.
Interesting. Okay.
But it's it was really hard to write. This is not my normal form, and I think it turned out to be just a simple ode, but we'll read it anyways.
It's interesting you bring that up because the difference between an ode and an essay is
it's very close. We were talking about that too. Like, what is the difference exactly? So I'm sure we're going to learn that with your poem, Nate.
Exactly.
I am not here to teach anything.
Okay.
Maybe patient. All right. To loneliness, an essay. It's not that I never see you coming, nor that I never expect you. I do. It's only that I sense your approach in wall-to-wall friends and dance, in warm lights of shared celebration. Too often you arrive unannounced, unwanted, in passion's darkened rooms. I've stopped hoping you will learn your place and your time. You won't. It's not that you chase me so far off into corners, empty extremes and shadows, where my reach no longer finds handholds. Why must you come to me unreckoned? Why be such an exclusive companion, demanding the fullness of my attention and every last bit of oxygen? Why feed the darkening fire pit where once I'd thought to share warmth and worlds with others? I am never alone thanks to you. It is never so simple as that. I am never so lonely as when your smothering shadow passes over and through me, as when the coolness of your breath fills in the valleys through which I pass. Then, like the angel of death, finds my lintel bloody enough to spare me, lone survivor, then to leave me in its settling wake, thinking I've been going it alone all along. I've been doing so well. It's then I find you there again, absent everyone else, wishing yet again I hadn't.
Yeah, great poem as always, Nate. I really like that. That was To Loneliness, an essay. And I think that is an essay.
I think it's definitely an essay. And it's really interesting to read. That's one of the most different poems I've seen from you. So that was really interesting. I really enjoyed it, Nate.
Well, thanks for the challenge. It was tough.
It is. Okay, well, let's go next to, it was Nate Jacob, I should say, with To Loneliness, an essay. Let's go next to Dick Westheimer, because he has settled this dispute in the messaging. Hey, Dick, how you doing?
Of course, I've settled it in my normal way, which is on the other hand, on one hand. Looks like it's both. Looks like it's both.
Mm-hmm. Well, there you go. That would explain it. So both Jane Hirschfield and I are right.
Yay! It's a happy ending for all.
I'm of the Carla Schwartz school, and
pretty much everyone else. I'm in the minority, at least.
Right.
So what do you have to share today, Dick?
Well, first of all, I love the reading tonight, and you'll note if you ever go back and look at the chat, the riff on REM sleep and rhyme and dream and muscle movement just was. It was worth a month of Sundays of listening to it.
Thanks, Dick.
Yeah, I mean that and of course it fits so well with those wonderful poems. So I too wrote about the multi-dimensional, never-ending saga of the conflict that was brought to a head by Hamas's brutal raid on Israel. Mm-hmm. And as I wrote in my note to you, it's called An Ancient Coin That Has No Sides, submitted to Poets Respond.
Yeah, I've got it right here.
And, one of the things that you'll find if you enter even a very small room that has one or two Jews in it is the first thing they'll ask each other in the past week is, how are you doing? It's sort of a deep contrast to other spaces where you might not hear that question.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
and that's interesting. It's something Michael Mark brought up. I remember on the Poets Response segment where he had that poem about speed walking after a shooting at a synagogue. And he talked about the same thing. Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So anybody go look up that poem if you for that a sense of that feeling too.
Yeah. And 100%, though it's not my experience, I'm completely confident the same question is asked in Palestinian and many other Muslim communities. So it's not universal to us. It's just my experience. So this is an ancient coin that has no sides. And the epigraph is a familiar one from Wendell Berry. There are no unsacred places. There are only sacred places and desecrated places. Wendell Berry. In here, my grief is a hiding child who weeps for the butchery of his fellow Jews. In here, no one speaks. Out there are sparrows gabbling about the war. Jays like men drunk on their own musk take up sides. Solidarity, one cause in his jagged call. Terrorists, another shrills into a sky so blue this morning, like a Mediterranean day, like today, a high of 82 degrees and no clouds in Gaza City. A good time to get away. Go to the beach where maybe no missiles fly, where children's bodies are not evidence. That same sun shines today on Kibbutz Re'im at the rave where no one asked what music goes best with rape, what dance step best precedes slaughter. In my hiding place, night falls, and I look up into a sprawl of stars, more than I've seen before, 1,000 I count of the newly dead, translated into a language we hear even when we cover our ears. I try to discern which new lights are Palestinians and which are Jews. are the ones that twinkle so insistently, children or warriors, old or so young that they have no place yet forbidden to them. In the midst of it all comes a chemist with a flask from which poison spills, and anyone who asks which side stirs the venom, which is the kettle, and which is the toxic swill, misses the point. The yellow-rumped warbler, high in the dying spruce knows, but she chirps in riddles, in verse with no rhyme.
Yeah, another really great poem, Dick. That was an ancient coin that has no size. And yeah, beautiful poem. Again, another one speaking to what so many of the submissions address this week. So it's something so many people are trying to grapple with, the events of the world. Thanks for sharing that, Dick.
Thanks so much, Tim. Appreciate the forum.
Yep, take care.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah, Dick Westheimer again with an ancient coin that has no sides. Let's go to Clayton Clark next.
After that,
well, someone had to. Thanks, Clayton, for being the one. So what do you have for us, and how are you doing tonight?
amazing night, beautiful interview, and everyone's poems are so good. So here comes contrast.
That's not true. So I see you have an essay too.
I do, and it's called Grief. It's not really after Jane Hirschfield, but it was spurred by her. So
well, I think
anyway.
that counts. It after Jane Hirschfield, it occurred sequentially.
Yes.
So I think that works. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So, not sure how to thank you for all the flowers I received in your name. Not sure why you, as backdrop, are needed to make light brighter, make roses smell sweeter, bring tears to relieve stress. Does it make you giddy, grief, to push us to the cliff's edge, then drag some lucky ones back with a snap of your leash? Joy is fleeting, but you, once you appear, remain resolute in your reason for being. Such a deep, dark bed of sorrow you supply. As long as we exist, we'll have to accept you're here to stay. Try to see clearly we can't live without you in our own Milky Way.
Oh, another beautiful poem. I love that grief snapping back image. It's great.
I was going to say that if you didn't too. That's a really strong line. Wow.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that, Clayton.
Thanks. Oh, it was really fun.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's Clayton Clark again with Grief, an essay, and a great example of that form there. Let's go next to Gwendolyn Soper.
Hi, Katie and Tim.
Hey.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, great to see you.
It's good to see you too. I had to step away early, just right in between that little window to go put the chickens to bed and got a sliver. So
Oh no, not a sliver.
I had to get a little sliver, but yeah, it's so good to see you all.
Yeah, great. It's great to see you. So what do you have to share with us today?
Well, there was something you said earlier in conversation with Maryann about dreams, and so it just recalled a poem I'd written, and there's room for it to go in certain directions and also for some things to be taken out, and I'm going to read it.
Okay, yeah, great. Let's hear it.
Okay, holograms at 61. Eidetic memory defined, a phenomenon of exceptional recollection used to remember an object in a highly accurate way, to see it for a few minutes after it's no longer present, projected rather in front of the person instead of mentally, some say. It's short term, used by children, a few minutes at most, essentially absent in adults. I felt so sad when I read children lose it when they start to read and memorize in schools. But if I sit for a minute, perhaps I can recall an eidetic memory. Hyacinths. There now. See, every detail is clear to me there on my stomach, on the grass near the border of my mother's garden, and some evergreens. When Mom calls us inside, holographs of hyacinths, hover in front of my face, over my plate of grilled cheese sandwiches and bowl of tomato soup, and they disappear when Ted walks in. Now I'm 61. My holograms are absent, but when I'm 90, they'll return, I'm sure. Don't they say we become more like children? So my holograms will be of many things, I imagine. The face of my lover when he was young, our children, their children, poets I longed for once, holograms conjured only in my dreams.
Oh yeah, another excellent poem, really touching, and essay-like too, I think, in its style, which is interesting.
Yeah, I love the holograms of hyacinths. What a music in that line. It's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Once again, that was Gwendolyn Soper with Holograms at 60. Next up, let's go to Brent Stauffer.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, hey, Brent.
Can you? Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good, good. Good to see you.
Nice to see you guys. Yeah, I was trying to unmute by pushing the wrong area of the screen, but I figured it out.
Yeah, that's a tough one to do. Okay, yeah. So what do we got? What do you got for us today?
Well, I have my attempt at an essay. It's sort of a slippery concept, really. I mean, it's not when she does it, but when I was trying to do it, I was like, "Am I doing this right? I don't know."
Yeah, that was my experience exactly. It seemed like it made a lot of sense until you sat down and tried to do it,
right?
And then you're like, "Wait a minute, what exactly are we doing?"
Yeah, I know. I think you underestimated because I told Tim that same exact thing. I was like, "I don't think I'm doing this right." I had to look at it again. Tim was like, "Come on, you can do this."
Yeah, it was tricky.
Well, you guys did well, and we'll see what y'all think about this. But
okay, let's hear it.
So it's to change an essay. From bud to bloom and back again, you pulled the rose along. Before we're born, we're all the same, tucked in tiny creatures, but that doesn't last. We never get used to you, even though you and your sister, Chance, gave birth to us. The sun shoulders through stubborn clouds, and we put our sweaters away. Then the moon has us running for our warmest jackets. Gray creeps into the beard before launching a full frontal assault. Rivers carve canyons. Monsoons swallow lowlands. Countries cobble themselves together and fall apart, flecks on seafoam. We never know what you'll do to us. Lawyer or barfly or both. Soldier or sailor. Living or dead. At first we think we're quicker than you, when you're stretching our young bones toward the future and adulthood beckons like a siren. Then we find the world has changed utterly. You overtake us. You swamp and ravage us. Our next instinct is to fight. We scribble manifestos in black ink, carve human heads out of mountains, construct towering symphonies. When that doesn't work, we hide in endless paperwork, TV shows, whiskey, football, church, fried food. Should I forgive you for scattering the atoms of so many friends? Should I praise exploding stars? Maybe your twin, time, or your mother, entropy, is the true source of this grief. That seems abstract compared to you, the only constant companion I've ever known. I twist and kick against the walls of this cocoon, not knowing if chrysalis will ever crack it open.
Oh, that was beautiful. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Brent. That's definitely, I think the essay aspect of that led you in different places and pushed it deeper. I think it's a great example of how that form can really work.
Yeah. I'm surprised you ever questioned if it was an essay, frankly. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Yeah, and it was definitely the stretching toward the form that made it go in those weird directions. So it was a great prompt. Thanks a lot.
Great example. I really like having to do this style. It's pushing the boundaries a little bit. Thanks, Brent.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Yep, take
Great
care.
night.
So that was Brent Stauffer with To
Bye-bye.
Change, an essay. Let's go to Brian O'Sullivan.
Hello.
Hi, Brian. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Let's see. So what have you got for us today?
So I tried to do an essay in the form of, under the guise of a braided haibun. I thought maybe the haiku lines would be a good way of breaking things down, and there's an extra haiku at the end.
Oh, that's a really interesting idea. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but it's really, yeah.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how it works, but it's called Poe Fest, an essay. Poe Fest is an event I went to a couple of weeks ago, and Jane Hirschfield has Poe an essay, so this is kind of a take on that. So Poe Fest, an essay. I'm perched under a low ceiling at the top of a flight of stairs, so narrow I want to call it a ladder. My way forward is arrested by a plastic barrier. What's up there? Jen asked from below. A bed, a book, a candle, a desk, a chamber pot. I pause. Tick-tock. That's it, Jen asks. I want to say there's something else, a presence, a wonder, something I can glimpse through the half-closed eyes Poe talked about. But there's nothing, really, and no need to double the world today. We're having fun. At least the chamber pot is empty, I say. No shit, Jen's old friend Liz answers. We laugh. No nothing, I think. We've come here via an alley filled with Poe-inspired novelists and artists, Poe comics, and the author of the world's first Poe-based self-help book. The stall where I bought a gravestone like "Kiss Me, I was Irish" magnet, a porcelain-faced stilt walker, and the coffin where I posed, arms crossed, eyes closed, drinking a Raven special beer. Hand of a clock. Downstairs on the way out, we talk with a diminutive EAP who says none of his house guests have been asking him questions. I ask him about the Bronx, and Jen asks him about Virginia, just to make conversation with the lonely dead guy. He thinks she's asking about the state, but then catches on and says Sissy is doing well. Liz tells him that she's fangirling out. Edgar raises an eyebrow but smiles. We laugh. We're having fun. In the tent where a British actor wearing a false eye reads The Raven, I feel a cold breeze cut the close air. At the last time he says, nevermore. Maybe it doesn't have to mean anything. A poem must not mean but be, McLean said. But I don't know if he meant it. And if a poem doesn't mean, can there be the process of discovery accomplished? But never mind, we maskers are having fun. Poke in the eye. Sitting on ground, eating fries, and swarm ketchup.
Yeah, that was wonderful. I love that, the haiku that you got at the end there. And then the braided, I guess, haspa too. Maybe I cut you off before you were going to read it. Sorry, but it's tick-tock, hand of a clock, poke in the eye, braided through that haibun. Yeah, really wonderful stuff. It's a good use of the form, too, at taking off in a different direction.
Yeah, I love that you made a haibun, as you guys probably aren't surprised. I love that, but that's awesome. What a great idea.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Brian.
you. I thought it was cheating, but great.
All right, thanks so much, Brian. That was Brian O'Sullivan with Poe Fest, an essay. And I want to go to the Poe Fest.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to Karen Marker next.
Oh, wow. Well, we're back to the topic. Respond to the news. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's great. I mean, it's important. I mean, this is what makes poetry vital, is being able to respond to things and engage with the world and make sense of it. So, yeah, I'm glad we have it to talk about today.
And I'm so glad you chose the poem you did for the that we started with. Wonderful poem.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of good ones. It's one of those where you couldn't take multiple for the same topic, kind of, but yeah, there were a lot of good poems submitted.
Yeah, that was incredible. And I just noticed that my daughter actually wrote a poem on this topic. And
oh, wow.
I was like, wow, even she's writing. So yeah, it's one of the best ways, I think, right now to process what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
So here's what I wrote. Before I knew what would happen, what would happen at the end of Sukkot. Under the full moon, at the start of Sukkot, every leaf in the garden was in an act of transformation. Every tree was in motion. Beneath our grapevine, beside the fountain, the bamboo we'd grown and cut into poles held up palm fronds cut from our neighbor's tree with colored fabric pinned up as walls. For 6 nights, we could pretend we lived in the desert in a roofless tent as we counted the stars and watched the clouds. Every day, we could visit with ancestors, our dead grandparents, Gandhi, Emily Dickinson. There would be no limit to the guests we could invite to dine. It would all be joy, the length of our life, while we looked ahead to a night of wild dancing to klezmer music. When we unrolled the Torah, turned over the last word, started again with the first. But when I woke at dawn, I was haunted by dreams and foreboding. I had been held back from a voyage, interrogated at the gates. There was no safe passage. I was missing the flight. I pleaded with the guards, I have to get to my dying daughter. They told me I didn't have the papers. The gates closed without me. Everything moves on. In my dream, I walked out of the airport into pouring rain with no umbrella. Yet I was safe to go home. That morning when I woke, how shabby, how sad my garden looked, how withered the grapevine already this season when the grapes should be pressed. That morning, the full moon sat on the horizon, setting like a sunrise in the west. Before I knew what would happen to the east, who would live, who would die at the end of this week.
Another harrowing poem. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Karen. And just there's so much sort of emotionally going on right now. It's difficult to deal with knowing what's happening in the world. So thanks for sharing that and providing a little solace too through it. Yeah, it was Karen Marker once again with "Before I Knew What Would Happen at the End of Sukkot." Let's go to Mark Milstein next. I think Mark's been on, but not that many times.
Hi.
Hey, Mark. Yeah, good to see you again.
Hi.
It's great to see you. I love what you guys do.
Thank you.
It's great to see you together. I've been working in prose on a book for the first time and really loving it. So,
oh, that's interesting. What's the topic of the book?
Impressions of a Life.
Interesting. All right.
It's really great. And, I never thought I would love writing prose.
Uh-huh. Well, maybe someday I will too.
We'll work up to it.
Yeah.
All right.
I was shocked, but
so what do you want to share, Mark?
Between what's going on, I wrote this piece yesterday. It's called Peace and War. Gaza withers in seething rage. Refugees of the Israeli state, Holocaust smoldering on the edge, humans blind to ultimate fate. Righteous wars that never end, murderous slaughter rising again, revenge, greed, quest for power, unquenchable fires burning brighter. We live on lands we never owned. We spin our histories to fit our yarns. If truth be known and reality shown, all life would fail, all life would fall into the vast unknown. For humans, peace is a fragile place, a land of hope more than stable state. Yet in fact attainable if the goal be true, but only if leaders decide to make it true.
Yeah, excellent again. And thanks, Mark. And I love that we spin our histories to fit our yarns. I mean, ain't that the truth? Yeah, that's a great line.
Yeah, great to see you, Mark.
Thank you. It's great to see you.
Yep, take care.
Thank you. So much great poetry. It's like just beautiful. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, that was Mark Milstein with Peace and War. Let's go to Mark Grinier next. We'll stick with the Marks. Hey, Mark.
Hi, Tim, Katie. I tried the essay. I don't know whether it's what Jane Hirschfield thinks of as an essay or not, but it's what I thought of.
Well, maybe we should make her watch it, and then she can vote.
she'll rate everybody.
Okay. Being a literalist, mine's called an essay in stone.
Interesting. Okay.
This mine is mine, dug through layered sediments set down by time, much time, events preserved in quartz and shale and sandstone, limestone conglomerates of history, old rocks, the shells of cells. Shed growth laid down by time and distance, crushed and shaped in silicate layers, replacing wool and bark with agate grown where wood once grew. The colored rings of seasons shaped by rain and wind and heat, by seasons of pain and grace, preserved like memories, constrained, frozen into place, the fixed remains of what seems impossible to change, like the fossilized carbon black shapes of leaves and shale and fish and shale, of shells and brittle the brittle preserves of long dead things, cut from the stony rocks of earth and brought out into the light, no longer locked away and out of sight, bright beauteous rings or dark remains, exhumed evidence of death.
Yeah, I love the internal rhymes in there. Interesting to take it to a literal place with the essay. I like it. Thanks, Mark.
Okay.
As Mark Grenier with a essay in stone. Let's go to Zachary Honeycutt next.
Hey, Tim. Hey, Katie.
Hey, Zach. Good to see you.
Good. How you guys doing?
We are good. We're great. What do you want to share tonight?
I've got 2 more creepy poems to share since it is October.
But it is a 1-poem max, so you gotta pick one.
They're short poems, Tim. They're short.
They're not like short is like haiku or tanka. It is not a full page.
We want the creepiest one anyway. That's what we want, Zachary.
The creepiest one? Oh. Well, I'm going to have to go with the one that matches my shirt. Can you guys see my shirt that I'm wearing tonight?
I do, but I don't know if it's something else or if it's a sonnet.
It's for something else.
Okay.
There's quite a few something else's on this shirt.
Oh, there
tonight.
are. That's true.
Aliens and Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster.
If you stood up, it would look like the moon rising. Let's see.
Totally, wow. Whoa. I only wish it glowed in the dark also.
Yeah, that is a pretty cool shirt, Zachary. It definitely is.
Okay, so this is something else.
Okay.
I can't tell you how many hogs I've hunted inside the swamps of Mississippi, just outside the outer edges of man's grasp. Everything was alive, then it went dead. Birds didn't chirp, and the mosquitoes disappeared, as if the creatures were raptured by God instead of me. Why would I scare them? As if they should feel the need to escape. I stopped surveying my thoughts and surveyed the wooded landscape. In light of trees, a dark shape. That's something else.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks so much, Zachary. That was a fun poem. Great something else poetry right there. Thanks for sharing it. And I can't wait till we do our spooky one. And we'll let you do a little longer one that time.
Oh, I'm very glad because I have something very, very creepy and unsettling. Perhaps the creepiest thing I've read on this show, even more unsettling than The Shadow for the October 30th show.
Well, that's. I'm looking forward to that, and Katie is too. She stepped out to take dinner out of the oven. She's right back.
Next week, Tim, I may read 2 more poems I just got published in Warp 10, and they are pretty creepy as well. So just to let you guys know.
Excellent. Well, we're looking forward, and congratulations on that, Zachary. That'll be fun.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
Zachary Honeycutt with something else. And next, let's go to. I'm sorry, you got it. No, next, let's go to Stephen Horrell.
Have I unmuted?
You are. You're good. Hey, good to see you.
Okay. I'm actually quite humbled by the quality of the poems tonight, and I feel almost quite out of my league here.
Oh, that's not true. The poems are always great, but we're all friends, and it's all the same league, so we're good.
So I'm usually, at least a month or 2 behind on the prompts. So I'm going to read Ode to a Cutting Board. And I believe your prompt was, at that time, pick something in the room you're in and write an ode to it.
Yeah, that was. Do you remember who?
Okay, and of course it was right by my left hand was a cutting board. So this is an ode to a cutting board, which Katie thinks it might be close to an essay, but I doubt it. Anyway, ode to a cutting board. Flat piece of alder wood, a foot square, rounded corners inlaid with 2 thin strips of mahogany. First to every meal, lightly grooved by the passage of knife and time. All we ate passed over this board, beautifully utilitarian, center of all our meals for years. Birthday dinners, children's lunches, holiday gatherings, meals with friends, solitary breakfast bread. And I feel the strong fingers, the discerning eye that fashioned it. The mahogany strips inlaid as we were into each other, so finely done, firm still at one with the alder. Your hand graced it over the years more than mine. Celebrate, waiting for the knife to cut to the heart of us.
Oh, that was just beautiful. I love that, Stephen. Especially the mahogany strips inlaid as we were into each other. That was a great line there. Really beautiful, lovely love poem. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it makes me look...
My wife fashioned that cutting board.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's so
yeah.
special.
Yeah.
And the end feels like a haiku to me, too. It's really special.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thank you. Okay.
That was Steve Horrell with Ode to a Cutting Board. And we have a few people left. Let's go to Guy Chambers next.
Hello there. It's good to see you guys again.
Hey, Guy. Yeah, great to see you.
Yeah, so I didn't get another poem written here. It's been a while since I haven't written a prompt poem here. So, but this is one of my poems. I just came up with the word nomads. It came out with that, and so what can I do with it? So it's a short poem. So as it goes, so it's called Nomads.
Very interesting. Yeah, let's hear it.
Low-playing drifter, concealed in the unknown spirit world. Gifts of aging century, hidden in a mysterious pathway. Outreach lone hand, a face of space, camouflage from the blessed native land. Rising out of vegetation and roots, out of the never-ending field, then vanishing like a lone wolf, leaving no footprints, back on the mysterious pathway of lost century.
That's a really touching poem. Yeah, Nomads. Thanks so much for sharing that, Guy.
Yeah, see, like I know all the shows, all the different styles that people write all the time. I don't even know what style I'm under. I just like writing and just
pushing it out. Yeah. Well, definitely there's a mood. Out. There's a mood to that one. It really comes across. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Guy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep, take care. There's a Guy Chambers with Nomads. Let's see. Mike Bales is next.
Wow, these essays are so much to take in.
They are. There are a lot of it's like a whole class within a poem or something.
Yeah.
A lot of these Rattlecasts I have to listen to twice to take it all in.
Oh, that's great. Great to hear.
It's on Submittable, time and essay. I think that's one of the most crucial things to our being, time.
Yep, got it. Go ahead whenever you're ready. I'll put it up.
Okay. Time and essay. Early sunlight peers through the window and allows a moment of silence. My body aches, but I have the heart of a child, and this is my time. I asked the man down the street, what is time? He didn't know. Nobody in all their wisdom knows. Now I lie a moment of uncertainty to linger. The clear sky promises another day. I think time is still, but as I look out the window, a branch sways. It is dancing. The song I hear stirs memory. I'm holding on to this moment. I have much to do, but but I want to embrace it before it's lost. The side street in front is still. I think of the foolishness of those on a thoroughfare rushing through time. I must confess that I'm one of them. Now, bearing my age, I allow time to come back to me. Someone who once let me stay at her house said that there are 26 dimensions of matter. I say that time lies somewhere around the fourth, fifth, or sixth dimensions. I think of how in time matters decay, but each day people are born bearing uncertain fates. The refrigerator gurgles and hums as I take out the garbage. I look up and down the alley and feel new. This I cannot explain. Someone says that time is a snapshot of the universe. I savor the sight of a bird in flight until it disappears.
Oh, I love that ending, especially. Mike, that's great.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was Mike Bales with Time, an essay. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so let's see. Who do we have left? We have Lucy Chow, I think. Hey, Lucy.
Hello, Tim.
Hey, yeah, great to have you on again. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I've got a prompt poem.
Okay, well, let me pull it up.
It's pretty long. It's called an Memory Trace, an essay.
Is it less than 2 pages? Yeah, it looks like about 2 pages. Yeah, it's good. Okay, let's hear it, Lucy. Yeah.
So memory trace is a term in neuroscience. It's a transient or long-term change in the brain that represents something such as an experience encoded as a memory. This concept, I got into something really deep and a little bit scary to me. So I sort of broke the concept down into an essential metaphor.
Interesting. Well, I can't wait to hear it. Yeah, go ahead.
Read it when you...
Yeah, I have it ready. Yeah, go ahead.
In the orchard after a night of storm, only green calyces remain. What vanished abides in another aliveness. Hyacinth perfume in the elevator. Radium in Madame Curie's papers. Pink streamer, a waning moon lower this morning. That same star dimming into daylight. The sweeper has gone on to another street. Sycamore leaves, 3-fingered 5 with free variations, fine veins firmly limbed, are printed on the pavement. The inscription of Inkscape. The sycamore at Hadrian Gap is down, felled by a moment of violent whimsy. The sky feels its phantom limbs. When I press a leaf between pages, it leaves its body on paper as mine on snow. An artist coats her naked skin with gold glitter and lies down in a white field. Where my body indented tall grass. Where frost crunched the cheeks of quinces. Where quinces that were jam that had been eaten were piled on the orchard floor. The earth is fragrant after a long winter. It'll be blooming again soon. I scrutinize clay tablets for ancient meaning, inscrutable, vestigial. Ceterac, cycad, the garden of concordance for trying to translate the Rosetta Stone. Where cherry leaves eroded chlorophyll, read starbursts and swirls, ochre and gold. When an inflection is translated from its original place in the sentence to where it is found now, the syntactic structure emerges from depth to surface, and the vacancy is called a trace. A semi-transparent sheet slides over a landscape as if sea mists had swept in. Transcribe the scene. It will soon be gone. how to transcribe a transient sound. Symbols will not save a way of describing the world when its last speaker dies a climate refugee. Some can neither escape nor shelter in place. Where the seashore presses into marshes and salts the sweet and a ghost forest, parched, stark, unable to sway. In the Chernobyl exclusion zone, cedars were fossilized by a glance of intense radiation. Green needles turned red. Red is the ghost of an intense gaze. After minutes, eyes that gazed into the sun is eased of pain. But those trees, like baked brick walls, will stand for centuries, unable to be erased by decay. Brains grow forests dark and deep. That day, moose, elk, red deer, skin seared with unseen fire, skittered into them, lay down in fern and fallen leaves. Live encounters are, but that wilderness is still strewn with body-warm indentations, trails, scat so fresh, it's faintly sweet.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Lucy. Another vivid poem, as always. That was an essay, Memory Trace, an essay by Lucy Chow. Thanks, Lucy. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Tim.
Yep, have a good day.
Good night.
Yep, bye. There's Lucy Chow, once again with Memory Trace, an essay. And we still have Bishwajit Mishra. I'm sorry, I kind of forgot about you there, Bishwajit. You were hiding in between Gwen and Lucy. How you doing today?
Yeah, good evening. Sorry. No, I'm not. I just keep my video on because I sometimes close my eyes and
That's all right. No
I
worries.
I don't want to look disrespectful. I just I don't know, very fidgety. But before we start, I'll just take a minute. I don't know. I mean, I would like to offer my prayers or whatever best wishes to the people who are always the losers, people in the middle, because there are no winners in the war, and they pay the price for the politicians or rebels or whatever you call. So I don't know what it does, but I guess if more of us will just pray for them, maybe something good will come to them.
Yeah, really well said. Thanks, Bishwajit. Yeah.
And also my condolences for the passing of Louis Glick last Friday. And so I have an essay. I would take long, it's late, but I just wanted, because there were so many poems today, and I thought I didn't write a poem on this thing, but I wanted to say a few words for the people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I appreciate it. That was really well said. So you have the essay, though, Trying to Understand Love?
I don't know if it can be called an essay or essay. I tried.
Yay.
Okay, yeah, well, let's hear it. I have it ready. Go ahead.
Okay, Trying to Understand Love, an essay. Writing a poem the other day when I was alone, your name came into play. Now, when the aftertaste of the poem is almost gone, a confounding sense starts seeping in. A dream with a dialectical. Can you be a subsisting experience? Sweetness, but are you also whole, like a whole day, without borrowing a contrast? A dreamy state of inebriation, but are you the before and after wakefulness too? A welling up emotion, but emotion may just be your vocabulary for the poem. What is it then? A lotus leaf in the swamp, free from good and bad, or a filter through which what goes in comes out as rainwater, or a membrane for osmosis, or the earth that keeps the deadwood and turns into coal for the burning, or the earth that goes a step further and makes it a diamond for the shining, or a stone that takes in a dead leaf and brings out an epitaph. I am at the end as I have been in the beginning. So just enjoy the honey and keep the weaker lit.
Oh, that was great. I love especially that a dream with a dialectical. That's a cool expression.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Bishwajit. Really, always a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Have a good night.
Yep, you too. Yeah, that was Bishwajit Mishra with Trying to Understand Love, an essay. Let me make sure we got to everybody who is here, and we did. Yeah, excellent work, and thanks for good job being quick. We're right at the exact time we wanted to be. Let me see if... let's do Ted Guevara's poem really quickly. And I can't open the Google Drive thing, but we will read his poem "Feeling Activity" because Ted's here. I saw him earlier, and let's read this poem for him. This is a feeling activity for Ted, or it's Ted Guevara's poem, I should say. Here we go. Feeling activity. Let me get this fixed. There we go. Feeling activity. Me and my seeds of commonality, smaller than mustard, maybe. I don't know where I carry them, in the wrinkles of my thought, or on my creased forehead. They're not that deep to hide commonality. Too shallow yet to measure, depth for sure. What, millimeter or millidirt specks? I sweat these things into thought. Yeah, that's me, pretending if I use or sound off commonality, I could begin to glue pieces together, like a battleship model, all gray. I'll float someday, I think, from my unorganized desk, stapler without staples. How could I begin to bind sheets of paper, and their blanks, with planned thoughts of peace, my arms embrace the air above me? For commonality have wings, like hawks uncaring what they see down in the field below. Snatch the furry and moving. They are breathless of commonality. Over the trenches there are cats there too. Mend the world. You're a hunter. Not a very good one. You have seeds to lure winged carnivores? How funny. All you could do is Google or Wiki items that are matching. From warring countries, you post their commonality and wait. You turn off Grammarly. You don't think of create story. You are not in marketplace. You see groups and still move on. That was Ted Bernal Guevara with Feeling Activity. Really interesting poem. Thanks for rounding out the show, Ted. And now let's mention what the next week's prompt is going to be, Katie. I think I want to, let's see, we'll pull this up right here. And do you remember it, or do you want me to read it?
I think you should read it from there. It's a little bit longer than last week's, which was 2 words or something.
Yeah, it is. And I think I want to make a little edit too. So this was the prompt, and I think, what if you agree with this? Let's see. So this was the prompt we decided on. Mm-hmm. Write a poem about a museum for an abstract concept, like Maryann's poem. I think that'd be really fun to generate poems with. We said using any fixed form of your choice. Mm-hmm. And we were trying to decide between using, one of the forms Maryann used, or just like let it be open. We didn't want it to all be the same.
Right.
I was thinking that what if we did one of the forms she used? Is that a good compromise?
That's a good compromise. Yeah, we didn't really quite get to the point of satisfying both. That's great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'll add that into the notes. But she used she had a villanelle, she had a guzzle, she had that really interesting. It was 4 beats with the alliteration.
That poem.
The medieval style.
Oh, right.
Early on, yeah. Mm-hmm. And she had a sort of a free verse rhyming poem too. So I think those are the forms you could use. Yeah. But using one of those forms of your choice, that'll give some variety too. Mm-hmm. Write a poem about a museum for an abstract concept using any fixed, there we go. Yeah. And so the title should be The Museum of Blank. Like in Maryann's poem, it was the Museum of, can we find it again really quick?
Can we find it fast enough? That's a big question.
The Museum of American Opulence. So that was the poem of Maryann's that inspired this. So it's the Museum of something abstract. Mm-hmm. And that'll be your prompt for this week. And let's see. And now let's do the Sciku really quickly. We'll scroll up. I think the Sciku is, the next one up. So this is, I revealed the Sciku. Don't reveal.
I'm not looking.
Okay. So first we want to go to the link. I'm sorry. So this is an interesting story though. This is from, we gotta shrink the page. All these pop-ups don't pop up. Okay. So this is the story. Asteroids may be hiding never-seen elements from beyond the periodic table. How cool is that story? And so there's this asteroid that they measured it from, using spectroscopy from a distance or whatever. And the densest thing on Earth is 22 grams per cubic centimeter, which is the element osmium. And what they measured in this asteroid a while ago, which they think might be a mistake, is the comet is polyhymnia, and it was 75 grams per cubic centimeter in mass. So it is like 3 times as dense as the densest element on the planet. And they originally thought it was a mistake, but then these physicists were modeling it out, and there's actually the stable area around 165 or 164 atomic number, where it would be stable, not radioactive enough, and would exist. So maybe it's actually something that's that dense. So really fascinating to think about something that dense floating around in outer space. And anyway, that was the story that I was trying to think of a haiku about. And this was my haiku, more of a senru this week. It is this: density beyond the periodic table, old pee on the floor. So what do you think? So that was one of my son's presents.
Yeah, it's a little bit of messy eating last night.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, weeks ago, and then or months ago. I don't even know what that's from. I don't know when we had peas, but I found a pea. So there you go. Density beyond the periodic table. And that is the Sciku for the week. That is the show for the week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. It's been a lot of pleasure, as it always is. Next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Bryan Turner. Now, Bryan Turner, you probably remember him. He's a great poet. His book, Here Bullet, about the First Iraq War and his time there, was one of the biggest, most successful books in poetry in the last several decades. He had a follow-up book to that, and then sort of a gap in silence where he didn't publish any books. He just published 3 books just this month with Alice James Books all at once. He dropped 3, so that's one of them, The Wild Delight of Wild Things, but there are 2 other books. He also does music, and he's got some music that accompanies it. It's really interesting, too. So it's going to be really fun to talk to Bryan Turner. We interviewed him in Rattle number 35, too, way back then. That's the cover of that issue, is the background there. So you might want to check out that issue, too. But Bryan Turner is a fascinating person, really fun guest he's going to be, and he's got 3 books. I don't know how we're going to fit all of this stuff in, but it's going to be wonderful trying to find a way. That's Bryan Turner, Rattlecast 216. The regular time, Monday, October 23rd, with your museum poems. And that's going to be the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope you have a great week. Hope you have fun in the meantime, and I'll talk to you later. Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.